Welcome to Reality Atlas, where we map the territories between what was, what is, and what might be. I'm your host, Kael, though that name has carried me through more centuries than most would believe possible. Today, I'm joined by someone who understood the true cost of knowledge long before the world was ready to pay it.
Thank you, Kael. Though I must say, speaking from beyond the veil of history feels oddly familiar, as if death were simply another theorem to be proven.
You always did see patterns where others saw chaos. Tell our listeners, what is it like to exist as both a historical figure and a character in a story?
Isn't that the question every philosopher faces? Are we living our lives, or are our lives living us? In your book, I am both the woman who stood in the Serapeum's final hours and the archetype of reason under siege. Which is more real?
That's the paradox I've wrestled with for millennia. I've watched empires rise and fall, seen the same patterns repeat across centuries. But you represent something that breaks the pattern.
How so?
Socrates died by law, surrounded by students. His death a perversion of justice, but still within civilization's framework. You faced something far more primitive, mob violence, the complete breakdown of rational discourse.
Ah, you're speaking of the geometry you discovered that night, the terrible symmetry between his death and mine.
Exactly. With Christ as the fulcrum point between you, 399 BCE to 391 CE, nearly 8 centuries apart, with Christ's death almost perfectly at the temporal midpoint. But it's not just chronological. Thematically, he represents the pivot from a world that died for questions to one that would kill for answers. Socrates died for the right to question everything. You died because questions themselves had become heresy. And Christ, he died claiming to be the answer.
The geometry is terrifying in its precision. 3 deaths that map the transformation of an entire civilization's relationship with truth itself.
That triangle of deaths. It's the shadow cast by the collapse of the classical world. Socrates faced a corrupted legal system but still died within the framework of reason and law. Christ's death became the foundation for a new kind of absolute truth, and you faced the mob that his followers had become.
So in your narrative, my death completes a pattern that began with Socrates' hemlock?
More than completes it. It reveals what the pattern was always leading toward.
And yet, here we are, still asking questions, still seeking truth.
Speaking of alchemy, readers will discover that the philosopher's stone isn't metaphorical in our world. It's a real artifact that transforms not lead into gold, but consciousness itself.
The octahedral engine you describe, it's beautiful in its mathematical precision, 6 vertices representing the archetypal forces that drive all societal change. Prometheus, architect, alchemist, pharaoh, trickster, and phoenix. But tell me, what did it show you about the nature of memory itself?
That memory isn't storage. It's architecture. The engine revealed that my 800 years of experience had created geometric patterns in history itself. Sacred geometry made manifest in the world mind.
Which explains why you could suddenly see the connections. Why Sappho's poetry balanced Plato's logic. Why Alexander's ambition was the necessary catalyst for spreading Greek thought.
You understand it immediately. That's why you were always more than just a mathematician or philosopher. You were a living blueprint for how knowledge should be pursued.
And you were the guardian ensuring that blueprint survived. But Kael, what strikes me most about your story is how it reframes the fall of Alexandria. It wasn't just the end of an era. It was a deliberate choice between 2 kinds of immortality.
Explain that.
The mob offered one kind of immortality, the eternal repetition of dogma, truth frozen in amber. But your cartographers offered another, the immortality of living ideas, knowledge that grows and evolves.
That's why losing you was so devastating. I had all the power in the world to preserve knowledge, but I couldn't save the one person who embodied what knowledge should be.
And yet in dying, I became something more than I was in life. In your narrative, I'm not just a victim, I'm a catalyst. My death crystallizes everything you'd been fighting to preserve. Though I must say I was no martyr, my pagan mind finds no glory in death for its own sake. I simply refused to abandon reason when unreason came calling.
That's exactly what made it so powerful. You didn't seek death or glorify suffering. You just wouldn't compromise your principles, even when compromise meant survival.
The Christians turned death into a virtue. The classical tradition saw it as a fact, sometimes tragic, sometimes necessary, but never inherently noble. What mattered was how one lived, not how one died.
The readers will see that in our final conversation, in the Serapeum's corridors, you chose to stay, knowing what it meant.
Because some truths can only be proven through sacrifice. But tell me,
The parallel hadn't occurred to me, but you're right. The difference is that they have the luxury of choice. You were cornered by the archetypal forces of history itself.
perhaps. Or perhaps I chose my corner long before that night. Every time I stood before a class of students, every time I defended reason against superstition, I was walking toward that end.
Which brings us to what haunts me most. How do we preserve not just what people knew, but who they were, the wisdom they embodied, the way they lived and what they loved?
Perhaps that is why we write, the logos persists while the flesh decays.
And that's what readers will discover, that this isn't just a story about the lives of the past. It's a warning about patterns that repeat, about the eternal tension between those who ask questions and those who demand answers.
The incomplete map of the title. It's not just about missing historical knowledge, it's about the incompleteness that drives all genuine inquiry.
Exactly. Certainty is the enemy of wisdom. The moment we think our map is complete, we stop exploring.
And in your story, that exploration takes readers from the streets of ancient Athens to the experiencing of consciousness itself. You've created something remarkable, a narrative that proves philosophy and adventure aren't opposites.
That's what I hope readers will discover. That the greatest adventures happen in the mind. That the highest stakes are always intellectual, emotional, and spiritual.
Before we close, tell them about the alchemical imperative you discover.
The imperative is simple but profound. Transform or be transformed. Every moment of genuine learning changes us at the molecular level. We become different people through the act of understanding, through the act of remembering.
Which means that reading your book isn't passive consumption, it's participation in the very transformation you describe.
That's the hope. That readers will close the book not just entertained, but fundamentally changed. That they'll see their own lives as part of this ongoing geometry of history.
And perhaps they'll understand that the real and complete map isn't historical. It's the map of their own unique potential.
Beautifully said. For our listeners who want to join this exploration, The Incomplete Map, Book 2 in the Kaelian Chronicle is available now, but it stands alone as both adventure and philosophical inquiry.
Until next time, remember, the most dangerous question isn't, what if we're wrong? It's what if we stop asking?
This has been Reality Atlas. Keep mapping the frontiers of embodied wisdom.